Before proceeding with the rebuild of 234, I placed it on the railhead. I'm getting illumination at both ends of the train, so there is circuit flowing. It's picking it up through the trucks and into the circuit of the train, but it's not moving. It makes a light humming or buzzing sound. That could be anything from the reverse unit to the armature sieging, to lack of contact on the brushes. Rather than trying to find that one cause that may lead to other causes, which may lead eventually to a root cause, just going to do a complete disassembly, clean, and then reassemble, and we should have reached and actually resolved the problem. The first thing I'm going to do at this point is to remove the truck and coupler assemblies, which are these assemblies right here. That's going to allow us to get to the 4 screws. In general, I'm working off of historical information with older GP-7s, 4 screws that hold the body, the plastic body, to this die-cast frame. And that will release the truck and coupler assembly, and we'll be able to drill down from there. Now that is, all it takes is release of these 2 screws per truck, one in front and one in back, and then we'll be able to lift the truck and coupler assembly straight off. With both truck and coupler assemblies removed, I usually send them through some sort of cursory examination. Let's take the back one first. This will be the easiest one. I see some oil on the truck assembly, on the frame right in here. That is giving me an early indication that it may be a little over lubricated. The other thing I check is whether or not there's any wheel rub marks on the inside of these centered iron side frames. That's never good. That could cause shorting. It could also just cause friction that doesn't need to be there. That's a good indication to do 2 things. One is check the, although I didn't find it on this one, check the gauge on the axles and the wheels, and the other thing is to check freedom of movement of these centered iron side frames on the frame itself, the sheet metal frame. Now there is no movement whatsoever on these. If it is, it's just a tiny bit. Don't overdo it, don't over pull on it, but just see if there's any freedom of movement. I have found these before. It has such freedom of movement that is where the rub is coming from when the centered iron side frame rubs against the wheel. Normally what I do then is, after washing these thoroughly and maybe applying a little bit of contact cleaner at these points right here, I actually rebond these with crazy glue. It has worked really well. Centered iron is not the easiest thing to bond in the first place, but it seems to have worked well. But think about it, if you don't put a lot of stress on these, crazy glue ought to be able to hold these, or some sort of glue like that, ought to be able to hold these in place, because they're non-load bearing. They're really just for cosmetic purposes. They don't hold the actual axle bearings or axle bushings themselves. I then just put a drop in there, and then I put a small clamp on it just to hold it in place for 24 hours, and it has worked really well. Now, I do support lifting of these trains by the trucks. I don't support and don't recommend lifting of most American Flyer trains by the body itself, therefore allowing the body to support the weight of the chassis all the way down through the motors. I like to pick them up by holding them right on the ends of these frames and picking them up like that. Of course, you'd have one here and one there and picking it up. This one doesn't have a slide contact, so we're almost through with it. I am going to go ahead and remove the leaf spring using needle nose pliers. These are really easy to get in and out once you get used to them. Just gently push back on them and get this first tab out. You may want to move the truck just a little bit or rock it back and forth. There we go. And then I will wash after I get this out. I'll also clean it with alcohol and a little bit of Brasso, making sure there's a light lubrication on the front where they touch the knuckle coupler for ease of freedom of movement, and go from there with washing these. Now on the front one, the only difference is we have a shoe contact. Now this one seems to have good freedom of movement. It has good extension. It seems to have good spring tension. It's a candidate to be left alone. I also checked the shoe box. Now there's one interesting thing about this shoe box is it looks like there is something right there almost acting like a wedge or a shim to keep this box in place. So it doesn't belong there. I'm just going to move it out of the way. Maybe take needle nose pliers and just lift that out. It looks a little suspicious. I see no reason for it to be in there. I don't know of anything that would have come out of. So you take that little shim out and the shoe box is wiggling. That too is never something I like to move forward with. So I'm going to take the shoe out, and then after a thorough washing and polishing of all this, I'm going to hold the shoe in place, probably just like that. I'm going to put a small bead of, very small bead, without the shoe and the spring being in place, on the outside of the shoe, hold it in place for 24 hours. And then after that cures, I'm going to put a small bead of JB Weld down each side and maybe right there on the back, making sure that the box is square with the centered iron side frame and not pointing up like that. I'm going to make sure it's down like that and then bond it. I have found that it's better to move forward with having these shoe boxes in place. Now be careful applying these glues and JB Weld, because you don't want a blob of any kind of substance on the inside of the shoe box, because then it might make it difficult to get the shoe back in. Now off camera, I'm going to take this one out. All I'm going to do is squeeze it with needle nose pliers until I can get the tab out of the slot and then just pull it out. Usually when I put these back in, I'll spread them apart just a little bit, because this is going to require squeezing them down just a little bit, making them probably a little bit too tight or too narrow. And then once I get it out, get it cleaned and polished, I'll spread it apart just a little bit and then put a little light lubrication, probably of CRC 226 right there on the tab, so that it slides back down into the shoebox pretty easily. So off camera, I'll take that out simply by squeezing it with needle nose pliers and just keep working with it very gently. Be gentle, because you don't want to rip the shoebox off. It's not that difficult to put back on, but you'll see the shoebox has tabs where it connects to the center iron side frame. That's a good place to put the super glue, just to hold it in place. All I want to do with the super glue is hold it in place so that the JB Weld doesn't move around when I put it on. So the shoe came out, the slide contact came out by just applying a light pressure with it fully extended, a little light pressure, just to get that tab right there, that little T90 tab, out of that slot that's on the shoebox. The spring was in pretty good shape. It's got a little bit of compression on this end. I'll probably retension it just a little bit when I put it back in, because you want it making really solid contact with the rail. And now I've got access to the inside of the shoebox. You know, this is an important contact point, and you want to make sure that maximum contact possible is being allowed through the shoe, the spring, and the shoe box by cleaning it inside and out with contact cleaners and anything else that'll clean the surface. These truck and coupler assemblies are reasonably greasy. They're getting my hands a little oily and greasy and stained a little bit. So there's been a fair amount of oil put on these for some reason. Has gotten on them for some reason. So I'm just going to remove this leaf spring as well using these small needle nose pliers. And there we go. And of course you can shape these a little bit. Once you get them out and cleaned and polished, you can reshape them and then put them back in. They're not difficult at all. Just be patient.